So the big picture is the Anunnaki are, maybe not the most advanced extraterrestrial race in the universe or whatever, or the multiverse, but they're pretty darn close. They've been around for 7 billion years. So they're 3 billion years ahead of us, right? So imagine a species that has a 3 billion with a B year head start. So Eisenhower made a deal with the Greys back in the 50s. This all started out actually in 1947 when the National Security Act was passed. So the deal was about 100,000 a year, and we won't bother you. So that's why so many people were getting abducted from the 50s up until the 90s. You always hear about people getting abducted. Now you don't hear about anybody getting abducted, do you? Nobody gets abducted anymore. Don't. That's because their mission was a success. They have finally created a human alien hybrid, a human gray alien hybrid that is indistinguishable from a normal human being. To most aliens, extraterrestrials, we're the great apes. If you're a great ape sitting in the Congo eating a leaf or something, do you have any idea of a jet airplane flying overhead? Do you have any idea what a camera is? It's just like, that's the level, that's the difference between humans and extraterrestrials. If you gave a great ape a Boeing 737, what would he do with it?
In a world shrouded in prophecy and mystery, one brave soul embarks on an unnerving journey on behalf of all of us to find answers where there have only been questions. Prepare yourself for the hunt for the Antichrist.
Hi, I'm Erica Gray, and welcome to the Hunt for the Antichrist. My guest today is David E. Ballard, aka New Dave. David is an award-winning writer, producer, actor with over 200 hours of film and TV credits as a writer-producer for such networks as Bravo, Discovery, ESPN, History, LMN, Science Channel, and TLC, and over 60 film, TV, and commercial credits as an actor. David earned a BA in Spanish at UC Berkeley and a master's in film at the San Francisco Art Institute, and also worked as a staff writer at the San Francisco Chronicle before getting into the entertainment industry. The reason he's here on the show today is because he's also the host of the Anunnaki Ambassador podcast, which is about the influence of extraterrestrials on the past, present, and future of humanity. He's got a lot of pretty mind-blowing information about the extremely complex connection between extraterrestrials and the Bible, and I can't wait to hear all about it. New Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Erica. Great to be here. And as the Anunnaki say when they greet each other or say goodbye to each other, CHLUMU.
And how do you know that?
Good question. The reason I started the Anunnaki Ambassador is because, through my career as TV producer, a writer, person, I worked on a lot of documentary reality type shows. I met a couple of people in my adventures in the entertainment business. One was a translator at Area 51. Like, he was the guy, one of the people that they would bring in when an extraterrestrial would visit Earth. And they generally all come to the United States, Area 51, because they can tell, like, we have the most nuclear weapons, so aliens are very interested in nuclear weapons, and I'll get into that later. But
okay.
My main source, most of the information I put forth on the Anunnaki Ambassador podcast comes from the books of Maximilien de Lafayette, who is this kind of mysterious French guy that I've known him. I don't know if he's still alive. I don't know how old he is. He's very mysterious, but I have spoken to him several times on the phone. He gave me his blessings to do the show. And believe it or not, he's written even more books than you have, which is amazing. So that's one source that's told me about the extraterrestrials and the Anunnaki in particular. And my other source was a friend of mine who I've known forever. He was an Air Force combat controller, which is sort of like, Air Force version, like a Navy SEAL or something. And he was also this kind of, he told me his dad was in the RAF during World War II, and they gave his mother some sort of, experimental drug, because, they didn't know what they were doing, but he just followed orders. So he became this kind of genius kid, and they shipped him off to some secret government school when he was a kid for, I guess, other, experimental babies or something. And he invented some, perpetual motion machine or something. And then he, after, serving, in combat around the world as this Air Force combat controller, he got picked to work at Area 51. So he worked there for a year, researching and trying to reverse engineer alien technology. So I've got two guys that worked at Area 51. One's the translator, who's a language expert, historian. The other one's more like a technical engineering type guy. So I've got a pretty good blend of information about this whole big, secret world, if you will, that everybody knows about. And everybody knows about flying saucers. There's all this stuff going on now, but do I have do I have an alien in my refrigerator, that I can pull out? No, I don't, but I mean, the information is there's so much of it. It's so cross-checked. It's so intricate. It's so detailed. It would be really, to my mind, impossible for a person to write this many books with so much detailed information about this extraterrestrial situation. So that's how I know that the Anunnaki say CHLUMU. When they say hi to each other. Like I asked him once, I said, I've read all your books, but what do they say when just getting together? And he wrote, I have the email still, he wrote it. That's spelled CHLUMU, CHLUMU.
Okay. And I'm assuming because he's the expert, people who have had contact with aliens. But my next question is this. We're on the hunt for the Antichrist. There is the theory or the idea that these aliens are really demonic, or that this is a demonic race. What's your opinion of that? And what is the evidence that this is not a demonic type of a race and that these are actual aliens? How do we know this is not demons working miracles?
Okay, well, first of all, there are several extraterrestrial species, approximately 40 or so ish. I mean, there's no way of knowing. I don't have some top secret clearance, and but again, according to Max, 40-ish species have visited Earth. Are some of them not so great? Yeah, but most of them are so advanced, they're like, we're like, they don't care enough about us to do anything evil. That's not saying that there aren't. And again, I'm going to get into that soon, but I just wanted to, but the vast majority, they don't care about us. We don't matter to them. They don't dislike us. They're just like, to most aliens, extraterrestrials, we're at best kind of like, maybe, I like to put it this way. You know how there's those, like the great apes in the Congo, right? All right. And National Geographic goes, and Jane Goodall, we go over there once in a while. We'll send somebody go over there and, interact with them, take pictures, shoot video, whatever. we're the great apes to the extraterrestrials. If you're a great ape sitting in the Congo eating a leaf or something, do you have any idea of a jet airplane flying overhead? Do you have any idea what a camera is? It's just like that's the level. That's the difference between humans and extraterrestrials. Just think of a great ape. If you gave a great ape, a Boeing 737, what would he do with it?
Well, I understand because the spiritual realm exists within the quantum field, and quantum would give them quantum properties, just like the demonic realm. So I can understand your analysis that we're like apes in comparison because we're in the physical realm and we don't have those quantum capabilities, which
Well,
quantum computers, by the
I'm
way,
gonna have to
is
stop you there.
developing.
We do, and I'm going to get into that too, and I'm going to tell you all about that too.
Okay.
But let me just give you the big picture, big
Okay.
picture.
And 40 species. Question. How do you know 40 species?
Well,
Where
it's
does
40-ish, and again, this is Max who worked at Area 51, so he's got
okay.
a pretty good
So
idea.
they found 40 different types of
Yeah,
these.
I'm not 40 exactly, but around that many. But again, I'll get
Okay.
into the one. It's just the big picture
Okay.
is here's the big picture, and again, I'm going to tie it into the Bible. Don't worry.
And
So,
the Antichrist. We're on the hunt for the Antichrist.
well,
And of
I'm going to
course,
tell
and
you,
I
I'm going to
have the
reveal at the end of the show who I think is the Antichrist. So you'll see. Or
oh,
what
okay.
could be considered that sort of level of evil or whatever. But I'm going to get there.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So the big picture is the Anunnaki are, maybe not the most advanced extraterrestrial race in the universe or whatever, or the multiverse, but they're pretty darn close. They've been around for 7 billion years, so they're 3 billion years ahead of us, right? So imagine a species that has a 3 billion with a B year head start. So that's how advanced they are. They are very tall. They're very good looking. They wear kind of robes. They're like 8 to 10 feet tall. They have black eyes because they don't have retinas. They can shape shift. All extraterrestrials can pretty much do. If you get to this level where you're, flying around in spaceships from planets to planets or galaxies, they can all shape shift. They all have, these minds that can, uh, you know, uh, move things, with telekinesis. They can reshape matter. They can bilocate. There's all. Our brains are okay, and again, I'll get into why. But compared to their brains, again, we're like apes sitting on a bush eating a leaf. So they're very yes, they can be if somebody gets in their way, if somebody's evil, they think somebody needs killing, they will kill people. But in general, they're very peaceful. They're very they're just all about seeking knowledge, creating art, just living their best life. And so as one of their some guy that's about 4 billion years ago, because again, they were around for 3
Okay.
billion years before we got this solar. They decided they wanted to do a science experiment. They wanted to create some biological life forms, but they didn't want to do it on their own planet because they didn't want to risk contamination, right? So this the Science Institute of their home world, which by the way is called Ashtari, ASHTARI, which is in the Aldebaran system. You've heard of Aldebaran probably.
No.
If you look up at the night sky and you see Orion's belt and you see those three stars,
Okay.
it kind of points to Aldebaran. It's about 65 light years away. So it's pretty close in terms of, galactic or astronomical dimensions. So they picked this little off. We're in this sort of back eddy corner of the galaxy, and they thought, swell, let's make our little experiment there. So they basically imploded a planet and created our star, Sol, and they created our solar system. Right? So they
Okay, so you're saying, okay, so you're going, well, this is totally against what the Bible teaches, which is creation and God created the heavens and the earth. You're saying this species or multiple species created man.
I'm saying this one species created the entire solar system. And again, this is just like one science experiment in a remote corner of the galaxy. They've got all kinds of other stuff going on. To us, it's so important because we wouldn't be here without them. But to them, it's just like, cool, great experiment. So anyway, they can travel back and forth in time. They can manipulate time. So to them, waiting around a few billion years for a solar system to kind of cook and come together is no big deal, right?
So how do these relate to the Bible? How
I'm
does this?
getting there. I'm just giving you the
Okay,
big picture.
okay,
Just wanted
okay,
to set the scene,
okay.
Okay. So they let the solar system develop. They eventually send, a team to check it out because because they have a thing called a Mariah, Miraya, which is where we get the word mirror from, and it's like a screen. They can look anywhere in space and time with this screen, right? Again, super advanced technology. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but they can see from their 65 light years away. They can see like, oh, it looks like Earth, that solar system is ready for a little inspection tour, right? So they came here about 1.5 million years ago, and they started at Mars, when Mars still had some water and was semi-habitable, but it wasn't anything compared to Earth. But they figured they'd check out Mars first. So if you hear about people seeing weird structures on Mars that are just sort of old and crumbled, and it seems like something was going on there, that's the Anunnaki 1.5 million years ago. Okay, and now this is where I bring in the getting into the more demonic thing because
Yeah, to me this sounds like demons, but I don't
okay,
the
well here,
creation
but again,
and
it's not
also
demons. They're
the
not
young
demons.
there's
They're
a young
just
earth theory.
they're scientists. There's nothing demonic about it. They're just creating life forms that
Well,
they want to.
demons are spirits. I mean, they're spirits that have capabilities of what you're
Well,
describing.
just because something has the ability to create life, that doesn't mean it's demonic.
Well, I would disagree with you on the Anunnaki creating life
Why can't they create life?
because there's a lot of complexities about the
Well,
creation.
again, yeah,
And
no, I'm saying that's
this is like
that's
too simple. It's like saying the gorillas created life. I mean, this
no,
is
it's
too
like saying we
simple.
created life.
Yeah, this is too,
We're
it's
not
too
the gorilla.
simple.
We are the Anunnaki compared to the gorillas on Earth. So it's like, So anyway,
Okay.
these are the broad strokes. So the other thing is like, have you probably heard of the Greys, right? With the guys, the big heads, the big black eyes.
Mhm.
Okay. Those are the Zeta Reticulans, which is pretty close, astronomically speaking, to Ashtaris, the Aldebaran system. So,
I love these names.
well,
This is
that's the
this is a
name. That's
hoot.
the scientific name of the star system.
Zeta
Yeah,
reticulans.
it means
Okay.
it's called a reticulum system because it's kind of looks like a cross, like a reticule. It's like when you look through
Mm-hmm.
you look through a gun sight or it's got that little.
Now you got to understand, Dave, I'm totally 100% unequivocally skeptical.
Okay, no, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I know you think I'm crazy. That's why I'm doing
Crazy
this
Dave.
show.
By the way, why new Dave? If you don't mind my interrupting,
Oh,
why new Dave?
because okay, so I've been I've always been sort of like, creative, artistic guy, kind of the black sheep of the
Mhm.
family. Got out of college, worked at a newspaper for a while, moved to LA, and I'd put in like 20 plus years in Hollywood, just sort of like grinding away, drug addict, alcoholic, haven't, all that good stuff. And I basically hit the wall. I basically just had a nervous breakdown, about
Mhm.
10, 15 years ago. And I went into rehab and everything, and I had, spiritual awakening and, AA and all that. And it just, I felt new, like a new
Okay.
Dave, and that's kind of my whole thing is like everybody can be a new you could be a new Eric,
No, I think that's
you
a
know,
wonderful story. That's an incredible
so that's
story.
why I kind of adopted that, just, because it's kind of
Mhm.
catchy. There's so many Davids in the world. So new Dave, and it's spelled Dayve, like, oh, a new day.
Mhm.
So that's why I do it. But again, this is sort of like this information I'm trying to
By the
do.
way, you're a creative person. What you just described is a rite of passage for most creative people.
Well,
So, yeah,
yeah,
rite of
most artists
passage.
are a little kooky, because
Yeah, rite of passage.
I've never been my dad was a salesman, great guy, could talk
Mhm.
to anybody, lovely person, but I'm just not that guy, it's
How
like
about your mom?
she was, kind of traditional homemaker type person. She helped my dad,
Okay.
but it's kind of, the classic, more or less, homemaker, you know.
So
Uh
you had a nice family, a nice
oh
upbringing.
yeah, I mean, there was some emotional strife, in the
Mhm.
60s and stuff, because you had those clashing, the greatest generation versus like hippies taking drugs. It's like, it
Mhm.
was, and they were kind of like, socially they were pretty conservative, politically not that conservative, but socially, kind of uptight Yankee New Englanders, from that old timey generation. So there's
Okay.
a lot of generation gap, as they used to say, stuff
Mhm.
going on. So I kind of was like, witness to that. Um, but but anyway, so as far as the demonic part goes, or evil, or doing bad things goes, the Zeta Reticulans are
Well, excuse me,
basically,
let me just stop you right
yeah.
there. The bat demons aren't Satan is actually called an angel of light. And sometimes the demonic realm actually pretends and can come as an angel of light. So it's not that they're always doing something bad or evil. They could just be doing something deceptive. And that's how I would view this. But I want to hear more of what you have
Okay,
to say.
well,
But
the
you're a wealth of
Anunnaki are,
information. You're the ambassador on the
yes.
topic.
So the Anunnaki are not deceptive. They're brutally honest. The Greys are the deceptive ones. The Greys are basically
Okay.
they're very mysterious. Like I've been researching this for 20 years now. Even in, high levels of the government, in the military, and, so forth, State Department, whoever's got access to these extraterrestrial programs, they don't even know really where these guys came from. But my best, as I put it together, they are basically, cyborgs, right? They're part machine, part organic material, right? In
I
some,
have a question because you just mentioned the Area 51. When I know that there's the discovery of a couple of these beings, and we've seen those photos, when they analyzed them scientifically, what did they find when they analyzed the flesh or the material? What did they find?
well, I was going to get to that. So,
Okay, so
yeah,
I'm ahead of you. Good.
yes. So basically, they are. How we have AI now, like everybody's starting to use artificial intelligence, right?
Hmm.
They are basically what happens if artificial intelligence is allowed to evolve, right? They kind of were an AI that ran amok, right? And they started to just they wanted, they're very ruthless, and they will, try and dominate any lesser, species that they can. But the problem is, again, all the other extraterrestrial species have the same basic powers. Um, so they didn't really have anywhere to go, So, they started to kind of run out of room because people don't like them. They're sort of like the pariah of the universe, because again, just imagine, now we're in this time of like Trump and, Elon Musk, and, just think
Hmm.
of like a race of Elon Musks, where this guy just said the other day on TV, like, oh, the problem with humanity is we have too much empathy. you know? I mean, can you imagine a person saying that out loud? It's one thing to think it, but to say it on a TV camera, it's like, you know, wow, talk about demonic. You're against empathy. So these are like cybernetic, organisms. So no empathy. They do not know what emotion is. They just exist, and they don't need to eat. They don't need water. They don't need air.
Mm-hmm.
They do need to kind of recharge. It's like, they're like a machine. So yes, they do need to recharge their energy, like you would like a battery, but that's the only thing they need.
But they have to be
Cybernet.
recharging from something in the atmosphere. If it's not air, water, something.
No, it's like they have like power sources, they kind of connect to, like you would a battery. Like it's you take your iPhone and those cordless charger little disc things now. You put your iPhone on it and it just charges it.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what they do. And by the way, all the stuff we use now, we got it from them. But again, let's not go there yet. So anyway, here we go. You got
Well,
this
the book of
pariah.
Daniel does say that knowledge will increase. And we know that some of the ancients, the ancient gods in Egypt, some of those, and the Bible says that the demons are in the gods. So we know that the demons have this knowledge. But the
Right.
demons are also part of the air and also part water. Somehow they're supercharged with water.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
why I was
Well,
asking this, because
I'm going to get to that.
okay.
So I have an explanation for that too. So you got this pariah species looking for a place to live because no other intelligent, hyper intelligent extraterrestrial species wants to deal with them. So here comes the Anunnaki. They just created a beautiful virgin planet. Guess what? The Greys go, oh, look at that. Check that out. Let's go live there. So they basically have been squatting. They had to wait too, though, for the planet, had to get rid of the dinosaurs. They had to kind of wait for the planet to become semi-habitable, right? So as soon as it became habitable enough for like humanoid type species, they moved in. So the Greys are squatters on planet Earth. They've been here for millions of years. But the way they are constructed is they can't handle like solar radiation. That's why you never see them out during the day. They always, when they were abducting people, they always did it at night, aside from the fact that it's easier to do, clandestine stuff at night. They can't handle sunlight too well. So they live underground and underwater. They live underground in the Dulce base in New Mexico primarily. They got a base in the Bermuda Triangle. That's why there's a lot of.
I thought they were on another planet. I thought
No, they live on Earth. They're
Okay.
from Zeta Reticuli. They do have. They're from Zeta Reticuli, but they moved here millions of years ago because it got kicked out of the rest of the universe of the galaxy. So they're squatting on Earth. So they've been here. There's a base, like I was saying, under the underwater, the Bermuda Triangle, and up in Alaska. So those are three main places where they have bases.
Are you talking about that area in the Bermuda Triangle where there's been those disappearances and
Yes.
nobody ever finds a trace?
I'm not saying that they're responsible for all the disappearances, but there is so much. There's been so many sightings of UFOs in the Florida area for so long. That's why, because they live underwater and they come out in their flying saucers and they go do whatever they are got to do.
Well, there's also in Brussels, Belgium, which is the throne of the Antichrist. So why is it no surprise? Have you heard that about Belgium? All of these sightings and
that's again, that's not. That was the TR-3B. That's a military crap. But let me just finish up the the basics. So anyway, we got the basic, like this is the chessboard that I'm setting up. Planet Earth.
Okay.
Created by the Anunnaki is just another science experiment. The Greys, the pariahs of the universe, go, cool, let's go live there. And they were doing, again, all the, the myths of like, leprechauns and little people and little fairies and people appearing out of nowhere and doing stuff down through the history of humanity, right? We've always had these little people doing kind of crazy little things always, That's the Greys. It's all the Greys interacting with humans for thousands and thousands of years. Human civilization has only been around for about 5,000 years, since, if you want to, again, we can get into it. There was other stuff going on way before then, but, got wiped out in the flood of Noah or whatever. So anyway, that's the playing field. We've got these super advanced beings that created humanity as a science experiment. And then you got these Greys that have been messing with their science experiment, ever since it started, pretty much, So that's the problem. That is the fundamental problem. That's where you get into demonic, quote unquote, whatever you want to call it, evil activities, because the Greys have been infecting humanity with their weird, cybernetic Elon Musk, non-empathy vibes for literally, thousands of years.
Non-empathy vibes.
So that's the basic. That's the basic thing. I want you and everybody watching to realize, like, humanity is a science experiment. Okay, there's nothing demonic about it per se. It's just, look, God creates everything, right? God creates other beings. God creates life forms. God creates life forms that can make other life forms. That doesn't intrinsically mean that it's evil. It's just not exactly how you think it is. So that's one of my main points. Now, let me run this one by you, Erica. And here we go. Here's where we start to intersect get a little Bible action going here. I just wanted to set the stage.
Little Bible action. Go ahead.
All right. I'm going to read something to you. I'm going to read it in Anak. And that's ANA''KH.
Okay.
That is the language of the Anunnaki. So first I'm going to read it in the Anak version, and then I'm going to read it in English. And I want you to tell me if you think it sounds familiar to something you might have heard before. Okay, you ready?
Go ahead.
Okay, this is from the Anunnaki Ramadosh. And Ramadosh is basically one of their names for God, right? So the book of Ramadosh, and that's spelled Ramadosh, 2 words. It's basically their Bible, okay? So here is their story. This is a story that I'm going to read. Okay. In bida Ramadosh kali kilma wa falki uzu ina wa andru dunia. U Ramadosh kalki shama u erdi. Wa erdi naya shaklu farimara anu absi u Ramadosh liwa basra erdi. U Ramadosh shada ilmu erdi rua min bashri. U Ramdosh kalkabelti isama shava. Wa lelu wa fagru subi yamu badri. U hawamarkiya kila lama nasri u Ramadosh. Kalina ina erdi wadu.
All it's amazing how you can speak alien. Go ahead.
That's Anak. You just heard. That's extraterrestrial language. Okay. Now here's the English translation. And let me know what you think it sounds like. In the beginning, Ramadosh spoke the word, and the universe burst into being and was ready for life. And Ramadosh created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and only Ramadosh could see the earth. And the Ramadosh wanted to know what the earth would look like if it were seen by humans. And the Ramadosh created a female human from their own essence. They called her Chava, in their own image. In the image of Ramadosh, created they Chava. and the evening and the morning was the first day. And Chava was confused and said, I cannot see. So Ramadosh said, I shall position the earth not far from the sun, and there will be light. And there was light, and Chava saw that it was good.
My thoughts are
Your
that
thoughts?
we see this throughout the ancient society. We see this in a lot of the different false gods. And basically, it's false teachings orchestrated by Satan. And this group of aliens is a sect somehow underneath the devil himself. And that's why that passage is copied, because the devil is a deceiver and he's using this teaching to deceive. So that's why the similarity, but it's not uncommon for ancient societies and their ancient gods to have similarities to the Bible. Also,
That doesn't have similarities to the Bible. The Bible has similarities to that. They wrote that first. That's their book.
How do you have evidence that that was written first?
Because Max is a linguist and he worked at Area 51 and he knows these people and he translated it. They're 3 billion years ahead of us. We are their children. They created us.
You
They
have to have
taught us
evidence
everything.
that this was written by them, or some kind of a scroll or something that's left behind. What scroll are you referencing? Where was this found? Was it found?
It's from Sumeria. It's in cuneiform tablets.
Have you seen a photo of these tablets?
Yes, they're in the basement of the British Museum. They have hundreds. They have hundreds and thousands of these cuneiform tablets, and that's from one of them.
Well, the demons know the Bible. And by the way,
how can it be demonic if it's the exact same message? What's demonic about it?
Because the demonic changes the meaning so that you would learn a deception instead of the truth. That's what the demonic does.
It sounds exactly like Genesis. What's deceiving
about it? The deception is that these beings are the creators of the earth and have created humanity, and not that God or the God of the Bible was the creator, who created the universe, the heavens, the earth, and man. So it takes the emphasis off of God and it puts it on this group.
Okay, speaking of God, again, my point and my position is that just because another life form creates another life form, there's nothing inherently evil or demonic about that. We wouldn't exist if they hadn't have created us. And they are saying, and by the way, they say the same thing. Their creation myth for themselves is it's the same thing. It sounds almost identical to the Bible.
The Antichrist. What do they teach about the Antichrist and the Revelation?
Okay, well, we're getting to that. We're saving that until the end.
What is their process of redemption?
All right, we're getting to that.
Go ahead.
Okay, now we're going to move on to, so that's Genesis. Okay, so that's their, creation story of, Genesis is, pretty much exactly like the one in the Bible, because guess what? That's the one in the Bible came from theirs. They taught us everything. All right. So here, let's get into it. The one in the Bible
is so complex, and it's written over a 3,000-year period with 66 books, 3 different continents, all different writers, and the language is consistent. It's a complex, but yet simple.
I know. Look, and here's the thing.
One story out of it doesn't fit all of the pieces that we see in the scriptures. There's a lot of pieces and components.
Okay, but let me just make it clear. I believe that the Bible most of the stuff happened in the Bible. I believe it's pretty accurate, some sort of historical document. Yes, I think it did. Most of the things happen. And by the way, yes, I believe Jesus Christ, was a human being that existed, that had achieved Christ consciousness. No problem there. I don't believe he died on the cross. We'll get to that. There's plenty of other people in the history of humanity that have achieved, Christ consciousness. And I'll get into why we are able to do that in a minute. But let me just get into next Yahweh, the concept of our original concept, right? Of the Judeo-Christian, concept of Yahweh, the name you're not supposed to say, right? Okay. All right. So here's the Anunnaki connection to that. First of all, again, all knowledge on earth, all language, science, art, whatever humans do, we were taught it by the Anunnaki. Okay. The temple priests that served the Anunnaki when they first got here about 500,000 years ago, when they started their science experiments. And again, they are super advanced beings. If people are listening and they know about the Anunnaki, there's a guy named Zechariah Sitchin, who I spoke to him. I was friends with him. Very nice guy, very sweet guy. He was an accountant. He wasn't a professional linguist. Okay. So he mistranslated all the ancient cuneiform tablets. He said that the Anunnaki came here to mine gold to protect, to bring back to their home world, because the atmosphere was, failing and needed gold in the atmosphere to protect them from radiation or whatever. Completely mistranslated it. The Anunnaki came here as a science experiment. They were most interested in the blue-green algae in the Mediterranean because they use that as a food source. And they were interested in the planet in general because, it's a very, full of life situation. But yeah, and did they mine gold? Sure, they did. They did all kinds of stuff here. That's where you get these ancient cities in the middle of the Amazon that they find now with, radar or LiDAR. All these ancient earthworks and stuff. This is all stuff done by the Anunnaki starting 500,000 years ago. But anyway, let's get back to Yahweh. Yahweh was a common Phoenician name. There's nothing in particular special about that name. It was also a Christian name. It was used, the word, Yahweh, Allah, it's the same basic word. That was used hundreds of years before Muhammad. Okay. So the word Allah, and we're getting around to Yahweh, it was used by Eastern Christian, priests. It was a very common word for God. So it's a Christian Arabic word, which was adopted by the Prophet Muhammad.
But in the Hebrew, the letters within the name have meaning and provide dimension to the meaning.
No, I just wanted to point out. Yes, I'm getting to that. I just wanted to point out that, Yahweh, Allah, it's all connected, the Abrahamic religion. So here we go into where that came from. All right. So we start with the Phoenicians, goes Samaria, Babylonia, and, Phoenicia, the core, beginning civilizations on earth. Okay. So the original root is from the Phoenician El, or Baal El, right? Jewish, Hebrew, Judaic, Israelite, Yahweh Elohim, was the Phoenician god El, or El Baal, or Baal Hadad, or Yehi, Yehi. And that's originally, and that goes back to the Anunnaki Sumerian god of El Enki, or Ea. Okay, so that's the original. And okay, there's a lot of information. The main, the reason we have 12 gods in most pantheon of gods in any religion is because there was 12 main Anunnaki that came here. right? There was Anu and his son, Enlil was his oldest son, and Enki was his youngest son. So that's, if you hear of, any, Zeus or Odin, that's Anu, right? And then you've got, Mercury and Thoth and all these sub gods all came from Enlil and Enki and their sisters, and there was like 12 basic Anunnaki that were in charge of the program. So that's where we get the concept of a pantheon of 12 gods. Okay. So anyway, so we start with El, Enki, or Ea. Then we go to Yeha or Baal or El Baal. So El and
you're going back into the Babylonian. Also, these were the gods that the children of Israel would stray and worship and build altars to. But the scripture is very clear that what they were really worshiping was demons. So what you're naming are demons.
Well, let me just get through the etymology, though.
Try to usurp God.
Okay, it's not demonic. It's just the name for a god. Okay, so the Phoenician El became Eli in Aramaic, and Jesus on the cross before he didn't die in my opinion, but before he was removed from the cross, he would say Eli, or Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, right? Oh my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Right? So he was talking to Eli, right? So, and then that's where we get the Elohim from. There's the Elohim, right? The Elohim and the Nephilim in the Bible, right? Those are blasphemy. The Anunnaki.
Okay, you're speaking blasphemy. That's what you're speaking.
I'm speaking scientific
God of all
truth.
Gods. He's way above. This is
not evil. Gods. This is not evil, Erica. This is
evil.
Alternative history.
Evil doesn't have to be somebody with a pitchfork that gets you to kill somebody. Evil is just anything that takes you away from the true God or the God of the Bible. He's a very complex, esoteric, but very specific God. But it takes a lot of study to even understand him. And even with a lot of study, it's hard to understand because he's part of the heavens. It's part of this other world. But everything that you're saying is actually mentioned. There's somewhere mentioned in the scriptures about this demonic realm. And when you're saying that Jesus didn't die, the Antichrist is the nemesis. That's who he is. He's the nemesis of Jesus Christ. And he literally will come right before Christ's return, meaning that this final 7-year period ends with the coming of Jesus, and he tries to thwart it. This is this battle of the ages.
All right, but let me finish
Okay, go ahead.
The origin of Yahweh. Okay, so it's basically you've basically started Phoenicia and Babylon. So it's basically
it's funny when you're talking about Phoenicia, is the Antichrist is going to rise from the tribe of Dan, because the Danites were given to idolatry. It's the one tribe you don't see in the Revelation. But the Danites were very close with the Phoenicians. And then they traveled. They were seafarers. And then they went into Europe, which is where the Antichrist is going to rise from. The Danites were in Europe, but they learned from the Phoenicians. They also acquired the Phoenician gods. And another interesting thing about the Phoenicians is one of our types of the Antichrist, or one in the Old Testament, you have the king of Tyre, which was Phoenicia, was the Phoenicians basically. And he, had this empire through trade, but then it goes into his being the devil, which is a picture of the Antichrist, also a picture of the Antichrist. So it's interesting that you're mentioning now the Phoenicians, because there's definitely a tie to the bloodline and the roots of the Antichrist. I know you probably don't like hearing that, though.
Look, I just think that there is a connection between or from the ancient, proto civilizations, and it comes directly forward into, the biblical era.
Yes.
And Yahweh is just a combination of the traits and attributes of, the Yah, Yam, Baal, El, Baal of the Phoenician myths and the Babylonian myths. So it's not like it's some new idea that Yahweh was a god, because it was considered to be a god way before the Hebrews. The Hebrews just sort of inherited it. There wasn't anything special about it. It had been uh, worshipped for thousands of years. So that's what I'm saying. There's there's a connection there that isn't necessarily evil or demonic. It's just a historical fact that this concept came way before the Hebrews.
Well, that's also even biblical too, because we see that when you see the genealogy starting from Adam, and then of course you had one of the sons of Noah went for Babylon, became Nimrod of Babylon. And so you're right, that was before the.
And before then, my point is,
But I mean, and when they started, but at that time, you still would have had these forces. And you mentioned the Nephilim. The Nephilim are in Genesis 6. So these forces definitely were already on Earth.
look, I'm not saying that there is not evil in the universe per se, right? I'm just saying that it is not a specific being so much as, I guess, the way I think of it, as like a vibration. It's like there's loving good vibes and there's bummer evil bad vibes. How about this for an analogy?
Okay.
You got a supermarket, right? You go into the supermarket. You can go with your mind, your human mind. You can choose to go get, organic vegetables and, whole grain bread and this, nice water and healthy drinks and, go buy, you know, all the stuff to keep your body healthy. Or you could go over to the bakery and buy a bunch of donuts and processed food and go and buy a bunch of booze. You could walk out of there with a bunch of donuts and a bunch of Jack Daniels, right? And that's bad for you. That's admittedly not good to do, right? But it's ultimately your choice. If you want to put your attention on bad vibes, go for it. They're there. I'm not saying that there isn't some kind of bad, mojo in the universe, which you could ostensibly call the devil or, demonic forces. But it still is ultimately up to the person. You do have the power, I think, with our even with our puny human brains, you know, you can choose between the devil and whatever you want to consider to be God or whatever, be it Jesus or Buddha, whatever what's on the other side. So my point is, just because if I'm saying that the Anunnaki created us and that the gods as we know them were the Anunnaki initially, and then the concept of Yahweh descended from the initial presence of these super advanced extraterrestrials on our planet, that doesn't mean that is a negative thing necessarily, because it still boils down to the fact that humans can choose, what if they want to worship Satan, that's their choice.
But false teaching is a work of Satan.
How is it a false teaching just to say, hey, the concept of this God came from this super advanced race, which, by the way, also, I'm not saying that they don't believe in God and the devil themselves. I think that's what you're
Well,
misunderstanding
because
me.
it takes away from the message of the Bible and the message of Jesus Christ. But
Okay.
in the book of Revelation, Revelation chapter 18, we see the whore of Babylon. And the whore of Babylon, and this idea of the spiritual adultery, which is part of the Old Testament, is the idea of spiritual teachings, or yes, spiritual teachings that take or took the children of Israel or took people away from the true God. And we see in Revelation 18 the destruction of the what will be the future physical Babylon, which is the revived Roman Empire, as well as the spiritual and the false teachings. And by the way, all throughout Europe is all evidences of all of those ancient societies. It doesn't matter what country you go in. It's very heavy duty in Rome. And you'll see the sun everywhere, the sun that surrounds the Madonna photo or the Madonna relics, or the Madonna, I'm sorry, the artwork. And that goes back to ancient Egypt. And also at the Vatican, you've got this something from the temple that was in Babylon. I mean, it's like everywhere, from Greece, the Greek gods, the mythology. And it's even incorporated in the European Union in the symbolism. The parliament's built based on the Tower of Babel. So what's interesting about what you are saying is you do see remnants of all of this, but it's also written about in Revelation 18, and you see it when you go throughout the European countries. So that's, I guess, Dave, we just have to agree to disagree on this.
Well, again, I don't see that there's, a demonic presence or attribute to a race that taught us about the concept of God in the first place. That's my point is we were taught how to do everything by these advanced extraterrestrials. They taught us about agriculture. They taught us about, how to make buildings. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, how did Sumeria start? We were hunter gatherers 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 years ago. You're telling me after the last ice age, mankind went from, being hunter gatherers wearing skins, and then 5,000 years later, they're able to build these elaborate brick buildings and have agriculture. And it's no way. That's not how it works on Earth. There's obviously some intervention, something happened to get humans up to speed so fast.
I agree with you there,
So that's
because,
what I'm saying.
but
That's the
I think
Anunnaki.
again, I think it's more of a demonic influence, or the giving that knowledge, because
How can it be
we learn.
demonic if they're giving humans the knowledge of God? They're the ones
Because
that
it's not
presented it
God
to us.
that's presented in the Bible through his word. He's very specific. And there's a lot of
The
material.
Bible
It's a
was written
huge book.
thousands of years after the Anunnaki got here. What makes you think humans know any better than a super advanced extraterrestrial species about the spiritual realm? I get your point about how the Bible seems like it is a divine, revelation of the truth. And I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying that the Bible and the concepts contained within it would not have ever existed without the Anunnaki telling us about the concept of God in the first place. So
Well, I
how
mean,
can
look
they
at what the
be
Nephilim did.
demonic if they're introducing the concept of a loving God to humans?
Because Satan appears as an angel of light.
What is the problem? How is it satanic if they're telling you
Because
good stuff?
because good stuff that takes you away from the God of the Bible and the gospel message is deceit. Because basically the book of Revelation is the end of the age. And after that comes the judgment. And
why does God, that's the other thing. Here's the thing. The concept of Yahweh in the Bible is, not a great, the stuff that he does in the Old Testament is pretty horrifying, I don't see why people are so, think Yahweh's so great.
No, I totally understand what you're saying. I absolutely understand that. And not only that, if you just look at the suffering in today's world.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's so great about this biblical God if, we live in this hellhole of a planet? That's the other thing. According to Max the Anunnaki, planet Earth, again, science experiment. We're lucky to be around. We're just like, those guys in World War II when they landed on a tropical island in Polynesia. After the war, they built all these like shrines to these gods that descended from. They were called cargo cults. Or basically a cargo cult that is still worshiping these ancient beings in many ways. Yes, there's Christianity, there's Judaism, but again, it's all just sort of like a very, very long game of telephone, And again, I'm not saying that I don't believe it. I think there is God. I think there's love and everything. But I'm just saying, just because there's an intermediary telling us about God and love, that doesn't make them, to me, that's an oxymoron. But anyway, speaking of evil, Satan, let's get into it. All right. So the original word was, from the Anak, then went to Ulamite, then to Syrian, then to Aramaic, then to Arabic. So the original word is Satana-il, or Shaitan, okay? Or Satana-na-il, or Shatan-il. So these are, it's an Anunnaki word, Erica. They are telling us about the devil themselves. They know that there's an evil force in the universe. That's why they have a name for it. So, again, if that's deceptive, it's a pretty dumb way to deceive someone, to tell someone that you exist, right? All right, so we go from there to pre-Islam.
Not really. If you want to hide something from a thief, you want to hide it in a place in your home that's most obvious sometimes, because that's where they're not going to look. So deception, I mean, Satan is the master of deception. So why not throw himself in the boat? He'll say, oh, if they see me there, they're going to think that this is the truth. I mean, that's a master plot.
The civilization that brought you to life is telling you how to live your life and grow food and, educate yourself and build buildings. Is that demonic?
Well, how do you know they taught this?
It's in the cuneiform tablets. There are hundreds of thousands of these tablets from Sumeria that were dug up 100 years ago. They've all been translated. They all talk about the Anunnaki and how the Anunnaki gods taught mankind how to do all this stuff, as well as things like this. They taught us about the concept of, Shaitan or Satanan-il, Lucifer or Dijal, okay? The imposter. It's the god of evil. They taught us about the god of evil themselves while they were teaching us about good God and how to build buildings and grow food. To me, it just seems like they've been, provide us with a pretty well-rounded education,
Again, there's no evidence of them teaching. I mean, if I think of the earliest.
Well, again, there is, because it's called tablets that were written, created 5,000 years ago in Sumeria. Okay. All right. So now we're getting into the good stuff. Okay. So the original source of the concept of Satan was this Satana Il. And again, I know we're getting into some out there stuff, but that's why I'm the Anunnaki ambassador. I want to
Okay.
share this information. You can take it or leave it, but as I said earlier, I'm called New Dave because I had a spiritual awakening. I had a change of, the veil was lifted or the scales were taken from my eyes, whatever you want to say, in a spiritual sense. But I think there is plenty of room on planet Earth for us to become a new Earth and to kind of stop doing the same dumb stuff we've been the Bible and Allah and all this stuff. It hasn't really been serving us too well, Erica. We're destroying the planet. We're still killing each other. It's still, I'm not, there's not, what we got going ain't so great. I'm sorry. So I'm trying to introduce a new way of looking at Earth history in the hope that, people can get past all this, Jews versus Christians, Christians versus Muslims. It's like, it's so dumb. We're all the same dumb humans. Can't we just, religion creates more problems than it solves, in my
But the
humble
God of the
opinion.
Bible is not about, it's not about religion. It's more of a spiritual walk. It's walking in the spiritual realm. I'm not about religion. I'm just about a
Yes, I
spiritual
get that,
walk.
but I'm saying the ossified concept of religion and the church and the temple, and it's like it's
Well, the idea
not
is
serving
that
it.
in the Garden of Eden was the fall of man.
Well,
And
let me get
based
into
on
that.
my
I'm going to get
research
into
and
that.
analysis, and one of my books on 666, by the way, Decoding 666, the trees in the garden, for that to make scientific sense, by the way, because at that time, Adam and Eve were able to see God. So the human body or the human mind was somehow meshed with this spiritual realm.
I'm
So
going to get into that in a minute.
okay.
Let me get
And
into
so that was those trees were DNA changing trees, and the fruit
no.
changed DNA. So now man who was not intended to die would now die, disease
Okay.
would come in, but also sin would come in.
I'm not saying that there wasn't a first human being situation, but what I am saying, it's all metaphor. All right. I'll get into the scientific basis behind that story, but let me finish with Satan. So there was a true, actual Satan. Satana Il was the supreme leader of another extraterrestrial race that accompanied the Anunnaki in their second landing on Earth, because they got here about 500,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Then they had the first wave. Then they sent, another 50,000 years later, they sent another, group. The other thing I didn't mention is the Anunnaki their average lifespan is about 500,000 years, right? Humans are the only quote unquote intelligent species that lives such a short life, right? So most extraterrestrials live very long lives, not as long as the Anunnaki, most of them, but still 500,000 years, give or take. So human civilization has been around for about 5,000 years. To an Anunnaki, that's 1 year of their life. Okay, so that's what we're kind of dealing with. We have to think about totally different time frame, a race that has a totally different way of looking at time. And another thing, humans are the only race species that has time, the concept of time. No other species cares about time. They just live in the present. They can go back and forth in the past and future. They can literally travel back and forth in time. So the concept of time is unique to Earth and to humans. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And we don't even see that, by the way, in the prophetic forecasts in scripture. There isn't a concept of time. You can see in the divine authorship
that's
that
good.
it's written in the present tense with only references to the latter days as if it's all the same day.
Yeah.
So you
And
see
look,
evidence of that in the Bible.
yeah, and the Anunnaki, look, they basically left right as Egypt, the ancient Egyptian civilization was starting, because they got sick of us. They admitted to themselves, like, oh boy, we messed up. We wanted. So anyway, and the reason that we were created is because they just needed helpers. They need people to do the labor. They didn't really care about us that much. But as they started to live amongst us, they kind of took pity on us, and anyway, I'll get to that. So anyway, this guy, Satanael, was kind of an ally at first. They were supposed to basically work. They were he was the leader of this group of another type of extraterrestrial species that basically got contracted by the Anunnaki to help them, with their Earth project. But they didn't follow the terms of the contract, and they started breeding with the human females.
That's the story of the Nephilim in Genesis.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. This is where the biblical starts to meet the crazy, new Dayve Anunnaki Ambassador stuff. Yes, there was a race of beings that were, everybody was told hands off. This is our project. Leave the humans alone. But they came here, and it's like, well, I'm bored, whatever. And so that's why. And again, so you've got them, you've got Satanael breaking the contract, plus you got the Greys in the background, kind of not really getting involved yet because we weren't advanced enough for them to, we'll get into why they are interested in us. So that's when you start to get the first contamination of the pure Anunnaki creation of humans by this other race. And that was sort of the beginning of the end of the Anunnaki's involvement, because as soon as the gene pool started to get polluted, if you will, that's when we started to develop other kind of more negative aspects that you might ascribe to, demonic forces or evil, or, not being, as pure and righteous, for lack of a better term, as the Anunnaki. So that is kind of where the concept of Satan got started. There was an actual being, an extraterrestrial being that, was the first kind of enemy, if you will, of man, because they were doing things they weren't supposed to be doing. And then that sort of kept, that became part of the human story from that point forward.
Right, but evil, we see that in the book of Genesis.
Evil is universal. And again, the Anunnaki are the first to admit it. Planet Earth they admit they kind of screwed up. The other thing about Earth is that there's no other planet in the universe that has so much life. Like it sounds, as someone who's a lifelong, tree hugger, hippie, ecologist person.
Tree hugger, bunny hugger.
There's almost like too much life on Earth. It's like too much. And biological life creates these force fields, or these kind of like portals, if you will, that allow, they can allow flying saucers to travel through interdimensional space, but they can also allow, demonic, for lack of a better term, beings to come in and go out. So yes, Earth is swimming in evil spirits, according to the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are all about, they know about evil. They're not evil. Did they allow evil to come to Earth? Not on purpose, but it just kind of turned out that way. So
but it's not surprising to me that these parallels exist in the stories, because we see this throughout the ancient world with the various gods and the stories and the similarities. And then, of course, there's other reasons for that, but that's not uncommon.
Well, right, because it all stems from the original source, right? So anyway, let's move on. We're going to do Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve, and then we'll get to the a little bit of Jesus Christ, and then we'll get to the end times. So we got a whole end times thing for you. All right, so the Garden of Eden. There's this place called Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's this kind of mind-blowing archaeological site that they found like 10 years ago or so. These super elaborate buildings were buried under 10, 20, 30 feet of earth, and they dated them. They found enough material in to date it back to 10,000 BC or so. So it's like impossible, because civilization was supposed to start in Sumeria 5,000 years ago. So what's going on with this 10,000-year-old temple? That's pretty much, I'm not saying that's the Garden of Eden, but the concept is that the Anunnaki started to, when the Anunnaki first got here, there was many, many, many different kinds of humanoid beings, right? Their science experiment, as I said earlier, was too successful. They'd created too much life. So they had all these crazy beings, some of them had like 3 legs, and some of them, it's just
3 legs.
It was like all kinds of beings. So they as they stayed here, they realized, like, yes, they're all powerful beings, but somebody's got to go, plant wheat or
How do
whatever.
you know that they had 3 legs?
Because again, they are
like statues, or is it something they conjure? Because they were also making these like chimera statues, and
okay.
and
Let
that
me.
has to
Okay,
do with the
here's the deal.
mythology.
Here's the deal. Here's why we have these myths of, like, half man, half goat, whatever. The centaur. Okay, so again, Anunnaki, 8 to 10 feet tall, beautiful, no sex organs. By the way, we're the only species in the universe that has external sex organs. Everybody else has their sex organs internalized. If they have sex, it's sort of like an energy transfer. They can take an egg out and a sperm out. They make a being in like a test tube, for lack of a better term. Only humans have external sex organs, and that's because the Anunnaki got here. All the animals, including the weird humanoid people that were running around, had external sex
the weird
organs.
humanoid people that are in
Yes.
existence today. You just got to go to Grand Central in New York City,
Well,
and you're going to see people that don't even look like, they literally look like aliens. Actually, that's a very sad story, by the way.
We are.
It's very sad that
so
those people are wandering.
Of
That
course.
actually look like that.
Yeah. So the reason we get these myths of, the centaur or whatever is because when the Anunnaki started to realize, oh, we need some helping hands, because it didn't work out so great with, Satanael and his people, they needed laborers, right? So they started a genetic engineering program to mix Anunnaki DNA with humanoid DNA to kind of create a hybrid being that was smart enough to do work, but not too smart, right? The first, like the first version of man was, kind of a, basically what you would think of as, like Neanderthal or Homo erectus, like that kind of classic ape, from Africa, ape man type. So that was the first round. They kept going, about 300,000 years ago, they made another tweak, right? And as they were making these tweaks, they would experiment. They would take some animal DNA, mix it in there, see what happens. And that's where you get the myth of, like, oh, half man, half goat, half man, half this, They did all kinds of experiments. They're super advanced, but, DNA and, biological, genetic engineering is very complicated. So they had a lot of misfires. They eventually got about 150,000 years ago, which is, when you see, Neanderthal man start to emerge, and then, about 150,000, then you get the true Homo sapiens. That's when they finally kind of perfected it, right? And then came the Ice Age, and all that, all the other beings died off, and all that was left was the humanoid beings, right? So as the Anunnaki are getting, sick of us because of our pollution from, the original Satanael people, as they're starting to pack up, is when Sumeria starts. They build temples. They have, they give humans stuff to do to teach them, because they want, them to be able to serve them.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you get temples from. That's where you get temple priests from, because they would pick the best, and the brightest, and quite frankly, the best look. They wanted the best of the best. Those are the humans that were made the temple priests. Those are the people, those are the humans that did the cuneiform little tablets and everything. Those are the people that kept the records. And that's how we know all this stuff happened, because they actually literally scratched it into, wet clay and then baked it. And those things are still around. All that stuff is still here, right? Because they were teaching us. It's like you can't just give a baby a laptop. You give them blocks and give them a big crayon to, so they were teaching us. They showed us how to make, writing in clay. Like, here you go, dum dum. So that's why that exists.
There you go, dum dum.
So anyway, so part of the genetic, and let me just get through the genetic engineering thing.
That's
the
good.
genetic
Dum dum.
The Garden of Eden was basically in that sort of area, right? Because that's Samaria, the Middle East. They landed there because the Mediterranean, even today, right? What's the kind of nicest part on Earth is like the Amalfi Coast, or the Burgundy, France or whatever. It's like they landed there, and in the Middle East and on the shores, they landed in Lebanon. Basically, it's where the first ship landed, because it was the nicest part of Earth, right? That's why they did all their work there, because they went other places, but they always kind of had their home base there, because it was literally the most beautiful, temperate part of Earth to live in. So that's where the Garden of Eden was, in that general area. Now we get into the angels. Okay. So Gabriel, right, was the guardian of Janat Adan, or Eden, the Garden of Eden, right? So, and in Sumerian, her name was Ninil or Ninlil, or Gab or Gabriel. So Gab means a female guardian, a governor, or a protector. The angel Gabriel was the guardian of the Garden of Eden. She was sort of like the administrator. She was like in charge of the biological. She wasn't in charge of it, but she was the administrator, right? There's Anu is the king, the leader of the Anunnaki. Then his son was Enlil, and Enki. Enki was the genetic engineering specialist. So it was his project. And Gabriel,
the genetic engineering specialist.
Right.
But wait a minute, if they created beings, why would they need a genetic engineering specialist?
Because he was that took, they went from the Homo erectus kind of monkey man, right? And they blended the Anunnaki DNA with the humanoid DNA, and that's the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden was basically a genetic laboratory, all right? And it wasn't, and Adam was not created first. Eve was created first.
Where do you get that from?
Again, from the Sumerian tablets. So now we got Michael. Again, we're all working at the Garden of Eden to create the perfect human, slave labor, for lack of a better term. Then you got Michael, another guardian angel. He was known to the civilizations of the Sumerians, Babylonians, the Akkadians, the Hittites, and the Anunnaki as Ninurta. Okay. Then you got Raphael, known to the Sumerians and the Anunnaki as Enki. So Raphael was actually the younger son of the head of the Anunnaki, Enki. Okay, then you got Raguel, Sariel, Ramiel, Uriel, and those were all the names for Enlil. That's the older brother. Okay, so it goes all the way back to the beginning. Right? That's where we get the concept of angels from, because they are the messengers from quote unquote God. And I'm not saying the Anunnaki don't believe in God. I'm just saying for human, beginnings of civilization purposes, the leader of the Anunnaki was God, for all intents and purposes. His messengers were his sons, right? And they were given these names, these various names. I know the show is about the hunt for the Antichrist. I've been laying a lot of alternative history on you, and I'm trying to weave it into the Bible. So now we're going to get into the evil spirit, demonic realm, Antichrist part. And for me, as I said, Anunnaki created the solar system. The Greys saw an opportunity to find a place to live when they were the pariahs of the universe. To me, they are, for all intents and purposes, on planet Earth. I'm not saying there aren't evil forces at work in the universe, and the Anunnaki are transdimensional beings. The Greys are transdimensional beings. There are evil spirits in other dimensions. They come in, they go out. That's where we get, the ghosts, and, if people see weird, there's a word called the jinn, like Djinn. That's the Anunnaki word for evil spirits. It's where we get the word genie from. So
Reminds
there
me of the
are
word degen, degenerate.
yeah, well,
Similar,
yeah.
good. Yep.
I mean, similar. I mean, I'm not sure
Yeah.
about the etymology on that, but it's your same concept. But the idea is like, yes, I'm not saying there isn't evil in the universe, that there aren't evil spirits. I'm just saying that the Anunnaki are not that. They just created us as a science experiment. The Greys, though, are, by all, definitions of the word, evil, because they just see us as troublemakers. Like they think the Earth is theirs. They've been living here longer than we have. They were here millions of years before, the Anunnaki got here. So they just see us as cattle, right? They just see us as a source of organic material, because they are a dying race. They have to clone themselves to keep existing. So what they will do is, when their body, their mechanical body, starts to run out of, whatever it runs out of, or breaks down, or whatever, gets injured, they just transfer their consciousness into another body. They create a new body. So what happens when you do that is that it's like making a Xerox of a Xerox. Over time, the genetic material will get distorted, right? So they've developed this disease called progeria, which means you age too fast. So they've been having their own.
So that's why they look the way they look. That's progeria.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah. I mean, they're originally designed for space travel. So, they don't need a big, solid body, because that doesn't really help.
And they all suffer from progeria.
Yeah. Yeah. So the reason they got involved with humans, aside from like the mythical, little, genies or leprechauns or whatever, the reason they got involved with us for real is because we started using nuclear weapons. When you blow off a nuclear weapon, it not only detonates in this dimension, it explodes. It's so powerful that it explodes in virtually all dimensions. So these are transdimensional creatures. They got stuff going on in other dimensions. They can, it's like going to another country or something. Oh, I got to go to Germany on a business trip. Oh, they got to go to dimension X9 for whatever they're doing. All of a sudden, here's these, monkeys. We're like the great apes, right? All of a sudden, monkeys are blowing up giant bombs. No bueno. This is their planet. They don't want to lose their planet. And they were having the problem with, the genetic degradation. So ironically, though, even though it was a giant threat to their existence, it signaled to them like, oh, the apes are now smart enough for us to kind of start using their genetic material, because, we're not going to mate, combine with animals, because we're humanoid. That's when all the abductions started in the 50s. President Eisenhower made a deal with them after the Roswell incident. That's when we,
You made a deal with them?
yeah, yeah, we got
Tell me about that deal.
the deal was they would leave us alone and give us, technology like lasers, semiconductors, you know, night vision goggles, carbon fiber, all this stuff that we take for granted now. That all came from the Greys. That was given to us originally by accident at the Roswell crash because we got all this stuff out of the ship, but we didn't really know what to do with it. Again, you give an ape a cell phone, what's he going to do with it? So they said, look, we know you got our stuff. We know you don't know what to do with it. We've got a problem. You've got a problem. You want to use it. We want to use you. It's like one hand washes the other thing. So Eisenhower made a deal with the Greys back in the 50s. This all started out actually in 1947 when the National Security Act was passed. The deal was you can abduct like around 100,000 people a year.
Sorry. Where is this written?
It's again from Max working at Area 51 and having access to these
where
documents.
Is this document that Eisenhower negotiated with the aliens?
It's been enumerated in various documents that all kind of point to it. This goes to the MJ12 group and all this stuff. There's this post World War II. We were so desperate to fight the communists that we were willing to make deals with.
And Eisenhower was able to speak their language.
Well, they provide us. When an extraterrestrial race meets with the humans, they provide some sort of machine, like a translator, right? So they were able to communicate. So the deal was about 100,000 a year if you want, and we won't bother you. So that's why so many people were getting abducted from the 50s up until the 90s. You always hear about people getting abducted. Now you don't hear about anybody getting abducted, do you? Nobody gets abducted anymore. Don't. That's because their mission was a success. They have finally created a human alien hybrid, a human gray alien hybrid that is indistinguishable from a normal human being. That's why I think there's such a rise in autism. That's why the earth seems to just so much after all we've been through, we still have so many evil creeps running around doing all these horrible things. It's like we just cannot get it together to stop being just evil to each other. That's, I think, because of the influence of this hybrid race that is now running around on planet Earth. So that to me that's about as demonic as it gets, to kidnap someone. And they don't just kidnap one person. They don't do it much anymore, but when they were doing it, they would find a person that has the DNA for whatever purpose they wanted them for. And then they would stick with that family. Mm-hmm. So they would abduct, multiple generations of people. So that's, that's slavery. That's kidnapping. That's, genetic experimentation against your will, So, so that to me is about as demonic as it gets, because they are now, not only did they do that to people, but hundreds of thousands of people around the world, but now they are in control of those people because it's like a hive mind situation. They're kind of like ants,
right. Well,
so there's people doing stuff for them that have no desire to be supportive of the human race.
But what do you feel they have to do with the coming Antichrist? Now let's tie this to the Antichrist.
Well, I think that is the Antichrist. That's my point. They are the Antichrist for all intents and purposes. They
little gray dudes.
They have zero interest in helping humanity. They just want to exploit us for our bodies, like literally like cattle. And they also take body parts. And the other thing, again, you got to realize in the big picture, there's a lot of, there's interstellar, intergalactic, interdimensional travel and commerce going on. They take human body parts sometimes and use them as currency, and they will pay transdimensional beings with physical body parts because they want to be physical. I know this sounds crazy, but it's a crazy multi-dimensional, transdimensional world that we live in. And humans, again, are just so, we're so basic in our understanding of how the universe works. This all sounds insane. But again, to a great ape in the Congo, seeing a Range Rover is like seeing a flying saucer,
So do you feel they're going to produce the Antichrist? This one leader that has been forecast?
Well, I think maybe not one specific leader, but they have helped to create a post World War II human society where all, anything that's considered to be human, compassion, like again, getting back to Elon Musk saying, oh, the weakness of the human race is empathy.
I think I know what he means by that, though. I think that was a very simplistic way for him to talk about legal. A lot of the legal issues go so there. It's, it's the idea of so far empathetic that there's no boundaries, there's no penalties. I think that's what he's talking about. I think he's talking about the legal system as a whole that starts to become lawless because there's no boundaries. Everything's accepted, including pedophilia, all this empathy. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and think that maybe that's what he's talking about, because I see that happening in EU law as well as US law, and the boundaries are not so clear.
So he says
And then you
empathy is
produce
a
the same
weakness,
extreme, huh?
and he's trying to destroy the government of the United States, and he's trying to take away Social Security from old people.
I don't think. Are you sure he's trying to take away Social Security from old
Yes,
people?
they
I
want
have
to
not heard
destroy
that.
the Trump administration is trying to destroy the American representative democratic system. That is good in your eyes?
Well, I'm neither a Republican nor Democrat. I'm an independent.
Are you do you believe in representative democracy, or do you want a king to be in charge of the United States? Because
I
they
think
want Donald Trump to be a king. They want
I'm
to turn him into an
I
authoritarian
don't
leader.
see. I'm not seeing that as much as I'm just looking at policy, and I
Donald
see.
Trump is disobeying orders from the courts, so that's not an authoritarian move. What do you see that as then? If the president of the United States refuses to follow a lawful order from a judge, that means
I
the
don't
rule
have
of
the full
law is
details.
destroyed.
Yeah, I don't have the full details to comment. I know that there were
Well,
some
I'm telling you
illegals
that
that were
that's just what happened when
playing,
they took those
and
people from
and the law came down, and it was already in trust. So I don't know. Is he still continuing? Is he?
yes, of
I know.
course. Anyway, the point is the Greys have created, in my based on my research or whatever, they've created this sort of inexorable creep of inhuman behavior and lack of empathy being the most obvious sign that something is very wrong in
Well,
this
the
world.
Bible predicts that of the end times. Second Timothy says, "Know that in the last days perilous times will come," and it says that men will be brutal
Right.
and have no natural affection. They're going to be heartless. And the book of Daniel talks about the transgressors coming to the full, and this sin in society just climbing.
Right.
and
So
increasing.
that's what I'm saying. Like they finally finished their 50-year plan or whatever to create this hybrid race. And in my opinion, these people are now in the halls of power in Washington, in the EU, in wherever. They're everywhere. So that takes me to I'm going to wrap it all up now.
Okay, go ahead.
Now we're all about biblical prophecy and revelation and all that. So here is the Anunnaki version of Revelation, okay? The apocalypse. Because they see us, again, they've been gone for a year in their life, according to their lifespan. But they've been watching us, again, as I said at the very beginning, with their Mariah, they have these scanners that can see through time and space. So they see exactly what we're doing. They do feel, responsible for us because they are responsible for us. They did create us. They did screw it up kind of. And now they're like, well, not only did we screw it up in general, but now the Greys have gotten in there and totally polluted the gene pool, right? Of the human race. And so now it is time for the Anunnaki to return. They have decided that it's getting pretty close to the time. So here's what's going to happen. Here's the Anunnaki version of their return to cleanse the earth. The Anunnaki will start the cataclysmic event of what they call the Great Unveiling, which is what Revelation means, right? By removing all the clean, uncontaminated humans, all the animals, the plants, and the inanimate objects they wish to preserve, by taking them into a giant bubble that they have brought to Earth. It's made of, this special substance. They're going to use their, super advanced technology to literally, like, almost like Star Trek, kind of like beam everything off of Earth that they want to preserve, put in this big bubble next to Earth, just preserve it all. Then the ships will come through their, what are called Baabs. So it's BA''ABS, Baab. It's a Stargate or a portal. All these ships will appear overhead. They will kind of form this interlocking, basically like a sphere around Earth, right? So Earth will be contained temporarily by this giant machine, basically. That machine will then dispense what they describe as basically cold lava, like some sort of a black liquid, right? Will fall to Earth, and it will sort of like I don't know, like Drano or something, like it will dissolve all the pollution, all the bad people that they didn't, so it's sort of like, like the concept of people being, risen, taken off the earth or whatever, and this cold lava will dissolve everything that they don't want, all the evil people, all the pollution, all that stuff. And then it will finish its job, and then it will kind of turn into kind of like a powder, and then another set of machines will come and basically vacuum all the stuff up, so the earth will be left in this pristine, like basically brand new state. It's like getting your car detailed, but they're going to basically detail earth, so all the good people, all the animals, all the, oceans, everything will now be put back on the earth. And now here, all the people that were, according to the Anunnaki, worthy of being saved are now back on earth, right? So now what happens then? Like, what's the deal on earth once that happens? Let's say that happens. Okay. No more money. There won't be any need for business, because they will have this technology where we can, get all the food we need. We won't have to work per se. You can do whatever job you want. but there's no more, capitalism, anything driven by the need to make money. It's sort of like, like the Star Trek concept of the modern, the future, where it's like, oh, we don't have money
Mm-hmm.
anymore because all the technology gives us everything we need. So that's one thing. And so, of course, since you don't have that whole system, you don't need any more banks. You don't need any more governments. You don't need any more churches. And here's why you don't need any more churches, Erica. Because the Anunnaki, as I said earlier, can travel back and forth in time. So they will show humans actually what happened in the past. So they will be able to see Jesus give the Sermon on the Mount. They will be able to see Allah do his thing. They will be able to see Buddha giving his, so you won't have this whole, you won't need like, these allegories and metaphors, contained in these religious texts. You'll just be able to go see it, go to a building with a, Mariah where they can, look at the screens or, be actually transported back in time to see things actually happen in front of their eyes. And then if they want to, still be, if they want to worship, Christ or all, whatever, but there won't be any need for, they're perfectly welcome to, but there won't be any more need for an intermediary, right? You won't need a priest to tell you how to, to interpret the Bible, because you will have seen it already. You can see for yourself. You
That's
right?
pretty wild stuff.
Yeah.
That's really wild.
So, and basically, it's just going to be, for lack of a better term, utopian, because they're all the grays will be gone. That's the other thing, they're definitely getting rid of the grays. So no more gray influence. All the evil spirit, all the people, everything's been affected by any kind of evil or, whatever you want to call it, antichrist-like spirit, gone. And that's it.
Okay.
That's going to
Interesting.
happen in our lifetime. I don't know, but
It's pretty wild.
and the other
Pretty
thing is,
wild.
if you are kind of, because they're vegetarians and they don't believe in killing animals and stuff like that. So if you eat meat and you're basically a good person, they would kind of put you in like a purgatory. Again, this is all very similar to what the Bible says, right? In Revelations, right? You'll be taken somewhere. You kind of be put in kind of like an
Well, there is
Anunnaki.
no purgatory in Revelation. It's the lake of fire
Okay.
or
Well,
heaven.
in this instance, you kind of go to like kind of like a boot camp, but kind of you get a chance to kind of reset or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'll stick you back on Earth if you are found.
Okay.
But if you're, if you continue to be kind of like a, evil person, they're like, that's okay, and they're look, they do kill people. They do think if something is evil, they will kill it. They don't fool around. But if they feel like, okay, you tried your best, all right, you're back. So I hope this whole thing, I haven't intended to be
You were
disrespectful to your
very
religion or
thorough,
anything. I
David.
just,
Wow. If anybody didn't know what this teaching is, they know it now. But you also know that I think I made also clear, the biblical points that would be against it or how it would be interpreted through. But it's pretty wild. I mean, it has a lot of details. You must have, to become the ambassador, you must have done a lot of
well,
study and
like I said,
opinion.
Max basically made me an honorary ulema. So an ulema is an Arabic, it's an Anak word, but it's in Arab, it's in Arabic, it basically means
Mm-hmm.
scholar or wise man,
Now, are there more of you? Like, are there
Yes.
more?
Yeah, that's the
Do
other
you
thing.
meet? Do you get together?
Yes, ever since the beginning of civilization, remember I was talking about the temple priests?
Mm-hmm.
Ever since that first time there was a first priest, there has been an unbroken chain of Anunnaki ulemas, like humans that have been, brought into the program, as it were. So
Now,
yes,
do you meet with other ulemas?
yes, they're everywhere.
Okay.
They're all over.
And what are
Not there.
your
It's not that many. Maybe 1,000 on Earth.
okay?
But there's
But you're
always
meeting.
been a
There's enough where you're
presence.
meeting.
Huh?
There's enough where you meet together. Where you have
No,
someone to
I'm
meet
not.
with.
I'm not. I'm sort of like a junior ulema. Like these guys, we're talking. No, these guys can like. They have like powers and like magical power. You know, they can do stuff. You know.
Oh no, what I meant is, do you have others who believe like you,
Oh
or
yeah.
like
No,
ulemas who you meet with?
yeah. There's an honor. There's you know Max has a you know he publishes these books and he's got a whole
Hmm.
bunch of people. They're mainly in New York.
Okay.
A
I
couple
was going to ask
people.
where are they at?
Yeah, yeah.
California?
But yeah, I haven't talked to Max in several years because again, he worked for the Air Force, he
Mm-hmm.
worked with aliens, and you know, it's like they kept very close tabs on Max, shall we say. They let him
Okay.
write his books, but if he ever tried, if he, you know, they wouldn't really let him leave without permission. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's the trade-off when you get this, you know, the top tippy top secret clearance, they keep pretty close tabs on you. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope he's
That's
okay. If he's has, you know, passed on, then I'm sure he's, you know, earned the right to you know, live with them or something, or they transferred his consciousness to a body or something. I don't know. They have all kinds of abilities to keep living beyond they too can transfer their consciousness into a new body. But they live for 500,000 years. So, you know, it's not a very common occurrence.
okay. Now, David, we'd like to wrap up the show with some questions so that the audience can get to know who you are and what makes you tick.
Sounds
So,
great.
does that sound great? So, we've talked a lot about the your being. I guess you're like a high priest or something.
Just
Ambassador.
a
No, you're an
scholar,
ambassador.
or an ambassador scholar. Yeah.
Okay. Um, ambassador, scholar. Okay, so that's what you are, is the ambassador, kind of like
I'm
the
the Anunnaki
ambassador.
ambassador. Yes.
Okay, so our first question is, what book is on your bedside table?
Well, I usually have a few. I usually have one that's sort of like a spiritual, some sort of
Okay.
study type book. I'm reading, I've been a member of SGI Buddhism for a couple of years now. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a book about, you know, Buddhist concepts. That's one. Another
Okay.
one is Gore Vidal's autobiography, which is really taking a really long time to get through because he's so hyper intelligent and his
Mm-hmm.
vocabulary is so crazy. Like I always have to look up the words he uses. So that's taking a
Okay.
long time. But that's a fascinating study of this, you know, like the first true, like, you know, out gay guy, you know, in the 50s, you know, he just was like, hey, you know, he didn't care in the 50s, like, yeah, I'm gay, I'm writing books. What are you gonna do about it? You know, so he's a very fascinating, super intelligent guy. So really fascinating life story. And then I'm reading this other book by Malcolm McDowell. What is his name again? This actually, let me recommend this.
You're getting the book.
In the book, this is very interesting. Talks about how humans' brains operate much faster than we think. It's
Okay.
called Blink,
Oh, and who is that by?
Malcolm Gladwell.
That looks interesting.
So it's all about how humans can just, if you
And he
walk
talks
into a
about the
room, it
brain and
is,
how the brain functions.
yeah, like we have this ability to really think fast, much faster
Mm-hmm.
than we think. So that's he's got all these case studies, you know, academic research and
Interesting.
stuff.
That actually looks like an interesting book.
Yeah, so that's my bedside table book action.
Okay. And the next question, what was the last TV or streaming show you watched?
I watched um, Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates last
Okay.
night, which is a very funny movie. It's like
Was it
a, you
good?
know, late 90, like 5 years ago or something. You know, it's like
Okay.
goofy comedy about two
But it was
idiots.
good. It's funny.
Yeah, it's very funny.
Okay, Mike and Dave. I like the title of that. I think that sounds like it's a hoot.
Yeah, very good.
And what 3 songs would be on your all-time playlist?
I really love Heroes by David Bowie. That to me is just, gets me every time. Let's see. Probably uh um Thin Lizzy, famous rock
Mm-hmm.
hard rock band. Um Anything of theirs.
What was one?
Bad.
I'm not familiar with what was one of their hits?
They're most famous for that song, the boys are back in town.
Oh, yes. Okay.
But they did so many, soulful, great songs. So something like Bad Reputation or Opium Trails, something like that. Those are really great. And then I guess uh, Linda Ronstadt, like a really great Linda Ronstadt song or a Joni Mitchell song like Blue or something. Just I really love that kind of 70s singer-songwriter sound.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of hard to pick, but Joni Mitchell is just so the toss up between Joni Mitchell wrote her own material, Linda Ronstadt didn't, so I'd kind of have to go with the
I think
Joni
you're
Mitchell.
the third guest that's actually mentioned Joni Mitchell.
Really? Yeah,
Yeah, she's
she,
been mentioned a couple of times.
she's unique.
And now you've mentioned her as well.
Hmm.
We'll have to see as the show goes forward if more people mention Joni Mitchell.
Well,
That would be interesting. Interesting little fact about the show. Hey,
mhm.
in our questions, this was Joni Mitchell kept popping up. Anyway, where do you get your news from?
I have a little compendium of internet news sites that I go
Okay.
through. Most of them are left-ish leaning, but I also, I'll look at Fox News. I'll look at, all the kind of major newspapery type websites. Instagram, also, there's a lot of stuff. I've never really was a big Twitter guy,
Mm-hmm.
but Instagram has a lot of news oriented stuff. So yeah,
So you're an Instagram guy.
and I'll just blow through. It's like reading the paper.
Mm-hmm.
10 minutes, I'll just blow through like 10 websites and go bink bunk 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 and kind of assemble
Mm-hmm.
the day's horrific events in my head. Things ain't looking good for this country. What can I say? But empires fall. It's been 250 years. We shall see.
And is there an author, podcast, website, or social media personality you recommend?
Yes, I really like for like just kind of basic show busy, keeping up, because I'm sort of, for a long time been in, entertainment world. So I
Yeah,
can,
that's why I find your answers very interesting because
yeah.
of your background in
Uh,
entertainment.
like slash film daily is good. The Town, Little Gold Men, The Watch. Um,
Wow, not surprising, you have a list.
yeah, and then there's a really funny show. It's called Celebrity Book Club. That it's like this gay guy and his lesbian best friend, and they review celebrity autobiographies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I've always been, growing up the Bay Area, I've always been an ally, of the LGBT world. And so I like to kind of get that perspective because, they have a unique because they, kind of like how black people used to be the most downtrodden, they've sort of, somehow, thank God, become, our society has become less racist, I think, even though there is a lot of racism, but at least black people can, become executives and TV stars. And, it's like, it's improved for them. Gays are still a little bit down on the social ladder. They're still kind of a, societal, mores that are kind of preventing them. It's gotten better too, but I just like the point being, I just like to get that perspective. It's like the outsider perspective on
Okay.
all the normal
Okay.
stuff that goes on in the world. So,
Okay. And what is your favorite fast food?
um, well, I'm super against fast food in general. That corporate, you know, factory, gross, kind of food. But if you really have to get something from a quote unquote, fast food place,
Mm-hmm.
I would say can't go wrong with the bean and cheese burrito from Del Taco. It's like $1 or $1.50. It's really cheap. It's just beans and cheese, maybe a little rice. You can live
Okay.
on those.
Okay. And who are you afraid of?
My girlfriend.
Okay.
I'm afraid of uh, anybody that doesn't just have a basic human decency, because there's so many, again, getting back to like the human alien hybrid thing,
Mm-hmm.
there are people that just, in all walks of life, politics, whatever, just, people that think that they have a right to, interfere with your life uh, without any real um, prompting. I guess the classic thing would be like the Karens of the world,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a white guy, so if I was doing something and a Karen called the cops on me, I probably wouldn't get shot but if you're a black guy and, a Karen calls the cops on you, you could get killed, just for being. So those kind of people, anybody that thinks like they can just butt into your
Mm-hmm.
life without any provocation, it's like, I think, no, that's not how it works. Um, supposed to let people live their lives without, you know, sticking your nose
Right,
where it
right,
don't belong. That's
right.
what I'm afraid of.
And
Of
who
course,
makes you
all of our, fascistic, leaders that we somehow figured would be a good idea to put back in charge. But again, what are you going to do? I'm a stoic in that regard. It's like, well, okay, here the fall of the Roman Empire, here it comes. At some point, you can't be afraid of that. You just have to kind of deal with it as it comes.
well, of course, my perspective is always going to be Bible prophecy and geopolitics from that perspective. And I'm watching, and of course, I report on Europe, but so that's always going to be my perspective is the empire, the lineup, this final lineup, and what is the US policy doing in that's contributing. Anyway, so I won't go into that. Your next question, who makes you laugh?
Um, well, I think as far as like actual comedians that I find to be legitimately,
Mhm.
funny as opposed to just kind of like the typical hack, comedian telling jokes. Like some of this like really has a unique perspective on the human condition. I guess would be was it Rob Mulaney? John Mulaney, right?
Okay.
Yeah, John, let me see.
And he makes you laugh.
Yes, because he's yeah, John Mulaney, he's got a show now. It's like a live talk show. It's really
Mhm.
really funny. And if you watch Saturday Night Live, when they do like those big musical number, do you ever watch that show? Do you still watch that?
SNL? Yeah,
Yeah.
I watch little skits of it,
Yeah.
and my fave, of course, are the political skits,
Yeah.
but I don't always get through them all.
Okay, so whenever you see a one where the guys, they're in some place in New York and the guy and they're like at the, you know, bus stop, the like Penn Station or
Mm-hmm.
something, and the guy goes, "Oh, I think I'll get some sushi," and the guy goes, "What? You're gonna get sushi at the train station?" And then it turns into this big musical number about the horrors of eating train station sushi or something. That's John Mulaney. He's like this
Okay,
genius that can do these crazy.
that
Uh,
is pretty funny.
yeah.
The idea
So,
of
but
that's
he's got a little bit
hilarious.
of, he's got some bite. It's like politically
Mm-hmm.
ish oriented, so sociologically. Conan O'Brien is a super
Mm-hmm.
genius comedian, but my one thing with him is like he's a little too nice guy. He doesn't get political. I'm not saying you have to be like George Carlin or something, but I wish Conan was a little bit more, got his hands dirty a little bit more dealing with political topics and stuff. But otherwise, he's a genius too.
One of his funniest was when he looked like the former Finnish prime minister. I believe she's a former. And he went over there and he did. They looked like they could have been brother and sister.
Yeah,
And I thought that was brilliant. I thought when
he
he
is
did that routine, that was
he's
really
a
good.
generational talent.
I thought that was very, very funny and effective. So, who is the celebrity? And now for you, it'd probably be celebrity, politician, or expert you'd be most nervous about meeting.
Well, probably somebody that I actually respect, because if I didn't respect them, I just look at it as a chance to take a shot at them, if they're
Mm-hmm.
winning. So probably, I don't know, like Paul McCartney, because like he's just like the greatest human musician on planet
Mm-hmm.
Earth. It's like, whoa, how do you even deal with that guy? I'm sure he's by all accounts, he's a super nice guy, but just to have to be a human being of my stature in front of that, I mean, he's like a demigod, basically. So that's kind of scary to have to deal with him. But I've met a lot of, not scared, but semi intimidated, maybe, very, within reason. I mean, he's still
Okay.
just a human, you know.
Yes, yes. And what's your order at Starbucks?
Starbucks is I usually get a half calf Americano with room.
What's that?
It's like you mix espresso with hot water, so you get it's like elevated drip coffee, because if you get just
Okay.
like a cappuccino or whatever, it's mostly foam. So I like to get like mostly coffee, but then put some half and half in it and cinnamon.
Okay. Okay. So you're a coffee guy.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I drink tea. I drink tea first thing in the
Okay.
morning, and then when I go before I go to bed at night. But during the day, yeah, you know.
That's interesting. Most people like their coffee in the morning to wake up.
No,
And
it's
is
not,
that
I
what
don't
you?
like just dumping that into my body first thing. I like to have a little starter, little tea starter.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And how many, of course, you would whiz this. You're going to ace this one. How many Kardashians can you name?
Okay. Well, there's evil genius momager Chris,
Okay.
the female antichrist Kim Kardashian, just uh, Chloe, who I believe is supposed to be actually, OJ Simpson was her dad, supposedly. They look very similar.
Wow, you really know them and you know the history and
Um,
everything, giving details on this
but
show.
then, so it's Kim and Chloe, and then, but aren't the other ones like Kylie and Kendall?
Oh,
Aren't
you're
they?
good.
Aren't
Oh
they?
man, you're
Aren't
good. You're really
those
naming
are
them off.
Jenners, right? So they're on the
Oh,
Kardashians, but are they technically
I thought
Kardashians?
Chris, I didn't consider Chris. I thought she was a,
No,
I
Chris
don't
was the
know.
mom. She was the
Oh,
wife.
my bad. Okay,
So
my bad.
and then
But I thought, wasn't she
Kylie,
Jenner though?
huh?
No. Oh, okay, sorry.
So Kylie Kendall. Is there any more? Oh, and the brother, poor Rob.
I didn't know there was a
Yeah,
brother.
the brother. He's like this kind of, kind of. They're all like sexy and, sophisticated in their own ways, and he's sort of like this big kind of lunk guy.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, he's a perfectly nice guy, but he's just totally like, what happened?
Okay. And the final question, what's your version of hell or the worst way to spend a day or an evening?
Hell is basically anger. Like being angry
Mm-hmm.
at being angry at someone and having that feeling, of in Buddhism they say hell. You kind of there's 10 worlds. Like there's the lowest world is hell, anger. Highest world is Buddha state, and we kind of there's in between all this kind of you know you go hell, animal. Da, 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 it's always different. So if you're in that lower kind of anger zone, that's the worst. Or having someone angry at you and having to fight over something, whatever it is. That's just
Okay.
not a great way to spend your time on Earth.
Okay. Well, David, it was definitely fascinating. If anybody didn't know about the Anunnakis, did I pronounce it correctly?
The Anunnaki.
The Anunnaki. Okay, I was
Yeah.
close.
Oh,
I
one
was
other thing
close.
I just wanted to say.
I was close.
I just wanted to say the reason we are able to uh, have religious experiences in the first place and have any kind of spiritual connection to the universe or even go to heaven after we die is because the Anunnaki, as I was saying, they started off, with like kind of monkey men, and they kept improving up till about 65,000 years. And then it's like, okay, good enough. The reason we have this ability to even think about God or make any kind of connection with God in the first place is because there's a thing in our brain called the conduit. They implanted this like microscopic little cell that's in the center of our brain. And that is how we gain access to the spiritual realm. And that is what Christ consciousness is, or Buddha consciousness, or whatever you want to call it. Gurus in India that can bilocate or fly through the air, or whatever. There's humans that do have supernatural
So
powers.
you're talking about the third eye, or what's referenced as
Kinda,
the
yeah.
eye. I
But
mean,
so that's it. That is really the great gift that the Anunnaki gave us. If we have the ability to focus our energy and concentrate enough, we too can become like these extraterrestrials that can fly around the universe in flying saucers and stuff, because all that stuff is done with mental power. So that's something to keep in mind. We all have that ability to achieve that Christ consciousness or Buddhahood. It's just a matter of focusing your attention on it. It's very difficult because we're humans with external sex organs. We need food, we need money. There's all these distractions. But if you can just focus on your conduit, you can become this, a super powered being. And that, I think, is the
have you become a
hopefully.
super powered being from your Anunnaki
Yeah,
teachings?
you have to activate your conduit to become a super powered being as designed by the Anunnaki. So that is my hope for you and for everyone out there. Look it up. Look up how to, look at Max's book. He's written a couple of different books about how to activate your conduit. I've been trying for a long time, still haven't gotten there, but that is, to me, the ultimate goal of being a human, is to achieve that sort of activation and to become your own Christ, your own Buddha. We got it in us. Let's do it.
Well, David, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was definitely interesting. I know there's a lot of people who believe in aliens. I think I made the biblical point very clear on the topic, but definitely interesting. You had a lot of information on you certainly are an ambassador. There's no doubt. Anyway, so
Thank you.
again,
It's
thank
been a
you.
pleasure, Erica. And as we say in Anunnaki, in Anak, CHLUMU.
Okay, till next time. That was some interview by David Ballard. And if you want to know more, you're definitely going to want to check out his podcast. But I was absolutely blown away when he started speaking Anunnaki. Like, I didn't even know that anybody knew the aliens spoke, let alone knows their language. And he spoke it flawlessly. So that just blew me away. In the meantime, you're going to want to definitely hit that subscribe button. If you have any questions or comments, want to hear them, please put them in the comments below. Again, check out David's podcast. And this has been Erica Gray from The Hunt for the Antichrist. I hope you found that really informative. And you want to be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments. Not only your thoughts, I want to hear what you think about the Antichrist. Where do you think he's going to come from? And if you think that you have a clue, definitely let us know. And also, hit that subscribe button. Don't be shy, hit it. Anyway, I'm Erica Gray. Thanks for watching, and see you next time on The Hunt for the Antichrist.